Okay, in this video, we're going to go over how to use the quadratic formula. Basically, the quadratic formula is kind of like the atomic weapon. You can use it on any quadratic equation, but for the most part, you'll see that that all the methods actually are useful. It depends on the equation you're working with. But this one is already given that 2x squared plus 9x minus 5 equals 0. One rule that you need to remember when you're solving by use of the quadratic formula is whatever the equation is they give you, we always want to set it equal to 0. And that reason is because we want it in the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. Basically, what we want it in this form because when we use our formula, our values are going to come from our coefficients of each term. So the quadratic formula is x equals negative b plus or minus square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. So notice we want our quadratic equation in this form, and it's already set equal to 0, and it's in that form. So now we can take our coefficients of each term up here and simply plug them into this formula and get our solution with that. So it's actually not that bad. It's just a little arithmetic going on down here. Just make sure you watch your signs and everything because it is easy to make a sign error. So yeah, let's do this. So x equals, okay, so our negative b here, well, our b is the coefficient of our linear term. In this case, it's going to be 9. So we'll bring the negative down. So minus 9. And notice that negative just came from the formula there. So I just brought the negative along for the ride. Now plus or minus square root of, okay, now b squared. So our b is the coefficient of our linear term. So that's going to be 9 squared minus 4 times a now. So a is the coefficient of our quadratic term, which is going to be 2, and then times c. So now let's plug our value in for c. Okay, so notice c is our constant term. In this case, it's negative though. So the negative, remember, bring your sign along. So that's a negative 5, not a positive 5. Hope you guys keep that in mind. So minus 5 here. And then let's bring this on down. So now we're going to have 2a. So our a value is going to come from the coefficient of our quadratic term. So times 2. And now all we have to do is treat this basically like an order of operation problem and just simplify the math with some arithmetic. So let's see here. What's our next step going to be? Bring down the negative 9. We can't do anything with it yet. Plus or minus. Let's see here. We'll start with our exponent. So 9 squared is going to be 81. Okay, so now let's see here. We got negative 4 times 2. So a negative times a positive is a negative. So minus 4 times 2 is 8. Then we'll bring our minus 5 down. Now let's go ahead and solve what's in the denominator here. We've got 2 times 2, so that'll give us 4 in the denominator. Okay, now we'll have x equals, bring down the negative 9, we can't still can't do anything there. Square root of 81. We've got a negative times a negative here, which will give us a positive. So 81 plus 40 all over 4. Now we can say x equals negative 9. Oh, can't see that yet, sorry guys. Hope I've done enough and left you guys, sorry about that. Okay, so now my last step, of course, I multiplied the negative 8 and the negative 5, got a positive 40. We already had our 81 there. So now what we can do is we can do our addition under that for the radical, which will give us 121 all over 4. Okay, I'm going to have to move this up for another space. So let's start here. Bring this over here. So now we've got x equals negative 9 plus or minus. Well, over here we had the square root of 121, which we know that is a perfect square. That's 11. So that's going to be negative 9 plus or minus 11 all over 4. Okay, so now we've got our little expression down here, except we have that plus and we have that minus. So that's weird. So now what? Well, when we have a plus or minus like that, we have to break it up into two separate expressions, or formulas, I guess you would say here. Okay, so that's going to be negative 9. First of all, we'll have to break it up into negative 9 plus 11 all over 4. Or x equals negative 9 minus 11 all over 4. So we come out with two solutions by this. So x equals negative 9 plus 11. Well, we know that 11 has the higher absolute value, so we'll have to subtract 9 from that. Since that will give us a positive number, then that will leave us with 2 over 4, or x equals, over here we've got a negative and a negative, so we simply add those. So it'll give us minus 20 all over 4. So now we need to simplify our fractions. Well, we got x equals 2 over 4, which will reduce to 1/2, or x equals, and remember, the fraction bar also represents division. So here we've got negative 20 divided by 4, which will give us negative 5. So that is our solution. We have x equals 1/2, where x equals negative 5. And that's that one. Let's go through one more, and I think you guys should be okay. Okay, let's see here. Where's the next one? Okay, our next one is going to be 2. Okay, so for this one, notice they weren't nice to us, and they didn't set this one equal to 0 for us already. So we have to do that ourselves. Well, all we have to do is, of course, if we want to set this equal to 0, we have a positive 4x here, so in order to move that to the other side of the equal sign, we'll have to add the opposite, which is subtract 4x. So we'll know that that'll be 2x squared minus 4x equals 4x minus 4x plus 1. So we subtracted 4x from both sides, and then our 4x is canceled on that side. Okay, so that leaves us with a 1 over here. So since that's a positive 1, we'll also have to subtract 1 from both sides. So that'll give us 2x squared minus 4x minus 1 equals 1 minus 1. So our equation, when we get it in the form we need it to solve this quadratic by the quadratic formula, will be minus 4x minus 1 equals 0. Okay, so now that it's in the form that we need, now we can use the quadratic formula. So our formula is x equals negative b plus or minus the square root of b squared minus 4ac all over 2a. Okay, so remember our values come from the form ax squared plus bx plus c equals 0. So that's, remember, we're getting the coefficients from each term of this equation. I'm sorry, we're getting our values down here by the coefficients. I worded that a little weird. Anyway, so let's plug these values into the formula and find our solution. So first of all, we want b. Well, in this case, we got a negative 4. So that's the same as saying minus a negative 4. So this, in our next step, will actually become a positive, because that's a negative 1 times negative 4, which will make that positive. Bring down our radical now. And since we also have a negative for our b value, make sure that you put this in parentheses now, because we're squaring -4, not just 4. And if you don't put that in your calculator right, you're going to come out with the wrong sign, and it's going to throw the entire problem off. -4, what's our a value? Our a value is going to be 2. Remember, our a value is the coefficient of our quadratic term. And then we've got our c value. In this case is going to be -1. All over 2 times our a, coefficient of the quadratic term, which is 2. Okay, so now all of our values are plugged into the function, and we are ready to solve. So let's see here, x equals, okay, we got that -1 times -4, that gives us just 4, so 4 plus or minus. -4 squared will give us 16, minus, then we've got a -4 times a +2, so that will give us -8, so -8, hold on, I messed that up there. Yep, I totally messed up. Let's see, minus, let me do this, there we go. Okay, so that's 16 minus -8. Sorry about that error there, guys. And then we can bring down our -1. All over 2 times 2 is 4. So then that will give us x equals 4 plus or minus square root of, now we can use that, and that's going to become negative, since we got 16 minus -8, that'll become 16 plus 8. Times -1 all over 4. So then our next step will be x equals 4 plus or minus, I just probably can't see that, there we go, the square root of 16. Okay, so now we've got +8 times -1, which will give us a -8 all over 4. So that will leave us with x equals 4 plus or minus the square root of 16 minus 8 is 8 all over 4. Okay, so with this one, let's see. I'm gonna come over up here. We've got our 2 different solutions. Now remember, since we got the plus or minus here, we'll have 4 plus the square root of 8 all over 4, x equals, or x equals 4 minus square root of 8 all over 4. Okay, so first of all, we can rationalize the square root of 8. And we can do that because, well, 8 times 2 is 4. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that over here. Show you guys that 2 times 4 is 8 all over 4 here, or x equals 4 minus square root of 2 times 4 all over 4. And also, since we have a 4 here and a 4 in the denominator, well, those cancel because 4 divided by 4, of course, is going to be 1. So now we can break this up. When we simplify our next step here, we can get rid of those. Those cancel. So that will leave us with x equals, and here I'm going to separate these into 2 different radicals. So that'll be x equals -2 times square root of 4. I'm sorry, square root of 2. I don't even know what I said right there. I'm sorry. X equals square root of 2 times the square root of 4. Or x equals, let's see here, negative square root of 2 times square root of 4. So now that's going to become x equals, well, the square root of 4 just happens to be 2. So that'll be x equals 2 square root of 2, or x is -2 square root of 2. And that is your solution for that one. I think that should do it for today's assignment. If you guys need any additional help, just message me on Live Grades or email, and I will be sure and get back to you. Have a good one.